If you've been doing Neville's revision technique consistently for 2 weeks or more, and you noticed that it worked beautifully at first, you felt lighter, maybe saw some external shifts, all the emotional triggers seemed to lose their charge, but then around the 2 week mark, everything came flooding back stronger than before. This video is specifically for you because what you experienced isn't technique failure. It's a predictable pattern that reveals four specific mistakes almost everyone makes with revision. And the fourth mistake is the reason your results don't just fade, they actually reverse. Here's what's actually happening. Most people treat revision like editing a movie. They change the visual details of what happened. They feel good during the session. They think they've done the work, but they're still carrying the identity that was built by the original incident. They wake up the next morning with the same inner conversations, the same reactions to similar triggers, the same self concept that came from the unrevised past. So they're building a new memory for 1 hour and dismantling it for the other 23. By week 2, the original emotional charge has compounded until it overwhelms whatever they built during practice. I'm going to show you exactly why this happens and what to do instead. Let me show you the 4 mistakes that create this pattern. The first mistake is revising the incident instead of revising your identity. Most people approach revision like they're editing a movie. They change the visual details of what happened. They make it more pleasant. They feel relief during the session, but they're still carrying the identity that was built by the original incident. Here's what I mean. Take someone who has been practicing revision on a childhood trauma for months. Every night they revise the scene. They imagine their parent being loving instead of critical. They feel good during the session. But the next morning they wake up with the same self-doubt, the same fear of rejection, the same inner voice that was installed by the original experience. They've changed the movie, but not the person watching it. They remain someone whose confidence was damaged in childhood, who now has to do spiritual work to feel better, instead of becoming someone whose confidence was naturally built by loving parents. Most LOA teachers will tell you that imagination is just a tool to improve your relationship with your past. They're wrong. Neville taught something completely different. In his teachings from 1954, he said imagining creates reality, not imagining creates better feelings about reality. Imagining creates reality itself. This isn't therapy. This isn't processing trauma. This is actual memory replacement at the level of consciousness. When you revise, you're not creating a nicer memory of a bad thing that happened. You're creating the actual past that shaped who you are today. The revised version isn't a spiritual exercise, it's your new history. But before I show you the other 3 mistakes, there's a specific test that tells you whether your revision has actually taken root or whether you're just visualizing. I'll give you that test in a moment, because without it you'll never know if your identity is actually shifting or if you're stuck in the same mental loop. But even if you fix that first mistake, there's a second one that's even more subtle. The second mistake is maintaining 2 versions in memory. People keep both the original and the revised memory accessible in their mind. They think this is proof that revision is working, that they have options now, that they can choose which version to focus on. This is backwards. When revision is working properly, you should find it increasingly difficult to remember the original incident clearly. Not because you're suppressing it, because the revised version has genuinely replaced it in consciousness. I'll be honest about something. I've seen this exact mistake in person after person who comes to revision after years of therapy or self-help work. They've been trained to process experiences, to understand their past, to work through their issues. So when they start revision, they approach it like another therapeutic technique. They revise the incident at night, then spend the next day analyzing both versions. They compare how the original made them feel versus how the revision makes them feel. They treat revision like a coping mechanism instead of actual memory replacement. The way memory work is usually taught is backwards. The therapeutic model says you need to understand what happened, process it, learn from it, then move forward. Neville didn't teach it that way. Here's the actual sequence. You decide what past would serve your present identity. You revise your memory to match that past. Then you live exclusively from that revised history. no processing, no understanding the original, no keeping both versions active. Neville understood memory and imagination as the same faculty. There's no difference to consciousness between something vividly imagined and something actually experienced. What makes a memory real isn't whether it happened in physical time, but whether consciousness accepts it as true. When you maintain access to both versions, you're telling consciousness that the revision is optional, that it's not your actual past. So consciousness keeps both files open instead of overriding the original. Here's the test I promised you. If revision is actually working, you should notice that recalling the original incident becomes increasingly fuzzy and emotionally neutral. It should feel like trying to remember a movie you saw years ago, rather than something that happened to you. That's the signal that consciousness has accepted the revised version as your actual history. If the original incident still feels vivid and emotionally charged after 2 weeks of consistent revision, you're maintaining two versions instead of replacing one. The third mistake happens not during your revision session, but the moment you wake up the next morning. Most people do beautiful revision work at night, then wake up and immediately return to the same inner conversations that were built by the original incident. Within 3 minutes of consciousness, they've undone the entire session. Here's the pattern I've watched repeat with student after student. They revise a difficult conversation with their boss. They imagine it going smoothly, with respect and understanding on both sides. They fall asleep feeling like someone whose workplace relationships are naturally positive. Then they wake up, and the first thought that crosses their mind is anxiety about seeing that boss today. They start rehearsing what they'll say if he's difficult again. They feel the familiar tension in their chest. They check their phone for distracting news or messages to avoid thinking about work. By the time they get to their car, they're carrying the exact same emotional state they would have if the original difficult conversation had happened yesterday. The revision session might as well have been a dream. This is where the timing becomes critical. The technique itself is 1 hour of practice. What happens in your unmanaged hours determines whether it compounds or gets overwritten. Actually, let me give you the context first. If you want to go deeper on this, I've put together a complete state architecture diagnostic in the description below. It's free, link in the description. But here's what most revision teachers never tell you about the morning consciousness shift. There's a specific 3 minute window right after you wake up where your subconscious is deciding which version of your past to activate for the day. I'll show you exactly how to manage that window because it's the difference between revision that lasts and revision that evaporates. But there's a fourth mistake that makes all the others inevitable. The fourth mistake is compartmentalizing revision as spiritual practice. People treat revision as something they do during their evening routine, separate from their regular mental habits. They revise for an hour, then spend the rest of their waking time thinking and talking about their life as if the original incident still happened. They'll revise a painful breakup at night, then spend lunch with friends processing the relationship, analyzing what went wrong, getting validation for how badly they were treated. Every conversation reinforces the emotional charge of the original memory. Or they'll revise a business failure, then spend their workday making decisions from the caution and self doubt that the original failure created. They operate from the identity of someone who has to be careful because they've been burned before. If you've been doing revision for months without permanent results, the problem isn't the technique. The problem is that you're treating it like a 1 hour practice instead of a 24-hour identity shift. This is treating revision like a mental exercise instead of a permanent shift in what you accept as your actual past. Every inner conversation you have about the incident must now reflect the revised version. No exceptions, no processing the original with friends, no referencing it in your decision making. Here's a story Neville told that makes this concrete. A woman came to his lectures who had been practicing revision on her relationship with her daughter. For months, she revised their arguments. She imagined conversations filled with love and understanding instead of conflict. But nothing in their actual relationship changed. The daughter remained distant and critical. The woman couldn't understand why the technique wasn't working. Her visualization was vivid. Her emotions during revision felt genuine. Neville asked her what she did between revision sessions when she thought about her daughter. The woman said she spent considerable time each day worrying about their relationship, talking to friends about how difficult her daughter was, and bracing herself for the next conflict. She was building a loving relationship for 1 hour at night and reinforcing a conflicted relationship for 15 hours during the day. The revision never had a chance to take root because she was watering the old pattern constantly with her waking thoughts. Neville told her that successful revision requires what he called living in the wish fulfilled regarding your past, not just during the technique, but as the foundation of every thought and conversation about that relationship going forward. Now, here's the specific morning protocol I promised. The moment you wake up, before you check your phone or start thinking about your day, you spend exactly 3 minutes mentally reviewing your revised past, not visualizing it again, but simply acknowledging it as what actually happened. You think from the revised memory, not about it. You let your emotional state settle into the confidence and peace that revised history created. This 3 minute morning protocol is what determines whether your revision compounds or gets overwritten by daily mental habits. These four mistakes create a predictable cycle. Understanding this cycle is what separates temporary relief from permanent transformation. Week 1 feels amazing because you're finally doing something active about painful memories. The technique feels powerful. You have hope. You might even notice some external shifts as your energy changes. Week 2 is where the pattern breaks down. Your subconscious has been tracking the inconsistency between your 1 hour revision practice and your daily mental habits. It starts reasserting the original memory with compound interest. All the emotional charge you temporarily moved during revision comes flooding back, often stronger than before. You feel like the technique failed you, but the technique never got a fair test because three mistakes were sabotaging it from the beginning. Remember when I mentioned that revision is actual memory replacement, not therapy? This brings us to what Neville actually meant when he taught revision as permanent memory replacement. Revision isn't about changing what happened. It's about becoming someone whose consciousness was shaped by what you now accept as your actual past. This isn't visualization. This isn't positive thinking. This is identity surgery at the level of memory itself. This took me embarrassingly long to figure out, but most teachers focus on the 1 hour of practice. The actual gap lives in your daily consciousness. That gap is where your new identity either gets reinforced or gets overwritten by all patterns. Here's exactly what to do tonight. First, you'll choose one specific incident to revise completely, not just improve. You'll imagine it unfolding in a way that would have built the exact confidence and peace you want to have now. Second, you'll notice every thought and conversation you have about the topic over the next 3 days. Every single reference must align with the revised version. Third, when you catch yourself thinking or speaking from the old version, you'll immediately correct it, not just mentally but out loud if necessary. You and I are no different. Whatever I figured out, you can figure out faster because I'm telling you the gap directly. I spent 4 years on the manifestation roller coaster before I understood that the technique was never the problem. The unmanaged hours between techniques were the problem. The reason revision stops working after 2 weeks isn't technique failure. It's that most people only practice revision for 1 hour and practice the old identity for 23. By week 2, the math catches up with them. The reason your revision sessions stop working after 2 weeks isn't that you're doing the technique wrong. It's that you've been revising for 1 hour and reliving the original identity for 23 hours. You're building new memory during practice and dismantling it between sessions. The revision creates the new past. Your daily mental habits recreate the old one. By week 2, the old patterns have compounded enough to overwhelm whatever you built during technique. The gap was never in your visualization ability. The gap was in your identity maintenance across the full day. When I had this same realization myself in year 4 of practicing Neville's work, here's what I found. I had been on what I call the manifestation roller coaster for 4 years. Some techniques worked beautifully. Some never appeared. Some appeared then evaporated. No pattern I could see. Then I started paying attention to what happened between practice sessions, not during. My self-talk reverted to old patterns. My reactions to circumstances reverted. The first 3 minutes after waking were destroying entire nights of SETI's work. I was building state in 1 hour and dismantling it in 23. I started tracking my consciousness across full days. Timestamped journal entries for 2 years. The framework that emerged became what I now call state architecture. That's exactly why I built the source code diagnostic. It walks you through where your specific gap lives across the hours between practice sessions. The diagnostic identifies whether your state breaks down in morning consciousness, inner conversations, reactivity to circumstances, or mental diet between sessions. It's the protocol I wish someone had given me in year one to skip those 4 years of inconsistent results. It's free. Link in the description below.
And
Try this tonight. After your revision session, set 3 alarms for tomorrow. When they go off, notice what you're thinking about the revised incident. Are you defending the new version or reverting to the old one? The 12-hour gap will tell you everything. Neville said in his 1950s lectures, memory and imagination are the same faculty. He meant your revised past is as real as any other memory, but only if you treat it that way consistently. If this resonated, subscribe so we can keep going deeper together. Until next time.